achieved.
So one of the underlying scenarios coming out of the current pandemic situation, having to fight at the Apex Center in Vegas, is the talk of the smaller octagon and the impact it's having on the performances. Now, Ariel Helwani tweeted out an image that showed the full-size UFC octagon has a diameter of 9.14 meters. I don't know the quick conversion for my American friends, and an area of 69.3 meters. I believe that'll be squared. Conversely, the current octagon, the small event octagon, has a 7.62 meter diameter and an area of 48.12 meters squared. In layman's terms, the larger one is 20% wider and 44% larger. And what they're suggesting is by forcing fighters to compete in a smaller octagon, it's creating action and creating finishes. Now, the finishes over the last handful of events, we've been looking between 5 and 7 per event, which is pretty solid. And Dana White already doing what Dana White does. He's discredited the possibility that this is playing an impact. And, the finish numbers aren't overwhelming. It's not like we're getting finishes in every single fight, but it could be argued that the action, at least, even when you go to the distance, the action is more pressed because you can't simply navigate around the cage. You give people who are looking to engage the opportunity to cut off their opponents more frequently and with less room to, I don't want to say run, but less room to navigate. It compels the fighters to interact with each other more frequently. I don't know if that's the case. I'm definitely enjoying the action, whether I'm winning or losing, and it's producing some good results. We'll have to wait and see if things continue to play out. Obviously, the reason they said they've gone to the small event octagon is because the lighting in the Apex Center doesn't really properly light the larger octagon, and as a result, it's just better for TV to do it the way they're doing. I get that. I guess if that's the way we're looking at it, that's fine. Either way, hey, some excellent finishes, which we'll talk about momentarily. Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. Always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we are breaking down the upcoming UFC on ESPN 11, which will transpire on June 20th from the UFC Apex Center in Las Vegas, Nevada. 5 main card fights, including a heavyweight bout between Curtis Blaydes and Alexander Volkov. My apologies. All of my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so I encourage you to go check them out there. I'm going to try and do this as quickly as I possibly can so that I can... I've got a busy week coming up, and with the end of school, I definitely, some of that attention is required, so I'm going to try and post everything as quickly as I possibly can. Now, as far as my performance, I've just had a dismal run, and that's just the way it's going to be. We had a decent run going there for a bit, and I've been just not satisfied with my recent performances. 4-6, 7-5, 7-4, 3-8, 5-5, just garbage. Prior to that, 7-4, 7-4, 8-3, 8-4, 7-5, so just nothing overwhelmingly awesome. I have to go back to... When was the last time I had a really 10-3 at UFC 165? ESPN 7, I went 10-0 way back in late December. That was a pretty solid show. But again, I shouldn't have to go back that far to find these events where I'm really kicking ass and taking names. Nonetheless, we're going to keep moving forward and seeing how things play out. And those knockouts really sucked because at the start of the last event, because they were 2 of my fighters I predicted to win. But nonetheless, they were enjoyable to watch as an MMA fan. You can follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. The bet packs will be for sale as well. I'll be kicking them out at $15. We target both the hardcore grinders and the more casual bettors, depending on what you are. And on that note, let's get to our first main card prediction. The first fight of the night is a catchweight contest. I believe they are weighing in, it says 160 pounds. It will feature... Roosevelt Roberts, 10-1-0, taking on the timeless 31-14 Jim Miller. Currently, the odds have Miller at plus 187. Roosevelt Roberts coming back at minus 125, a solid favorite. Now, Miller's coming off a tough loss to Scott Holtzman. He had won back-to-back fights over fellow long-in-the-tooth long-in-the-tooth veteran Clay Guida and winner Jason Gonzalez. He had won 3 of his last 4. He tends to beat just enough guys to stick around. You look at those streaks, 3 wins, followed by 4 losses, then 3 of 4. And now coming off a loss here, he's up and down. It all depends on what level of competition he's being squared up with. Now for Roberts, he subbed Brock Weaver not that long ago in his during this pandemic scenario here. He has back-to-back wins. He's 4-1 in the UFC, clearly fighting the biggest opponent he's faced in the organization, looking to really fast-track himself into a shot at a top 15 contender. As I said, it's a catchweight bout. Roberts, though, is 6 inches taller than Miller. He'll have only a mild 2-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 9 years. Now, when you look at Jimmy Miller, there's not a lot at this point that he's going to shock us with. He's a well-established fighter. He's been around doing this for a long time. And he's a very dangerous but opportunistic grappler. He's not the type of guy who's going to, in most events, take you down and grind you out. If you go to the mat with Miller, he's looking to finish you. He's looking to take home a neck or an arm or something to that effect and put this fight away. That's absolutely the way it goes. He has 17 wins by submission and some very impressive names on that resume. But at the same time, he's known for taking chances. He will lose position. He's been submitted 3 times in his career. That being said, Nate Diaz, Charles Oliveira, and Michael Chiesa are 3 guys that would submit most people if given the opportunity. It's also worth noting for Miller, each of his last 3 victories have come by submission, so it shows how much he relies on his ability to slap that submission out, grapple his opponent. Now, when you flip the script, you delve a little deeper into that. Of those 3 opponents have a combined 14 losses by submission, which accounts for 52% of their overall career defeats. Now, Clay Guida does have 10 of those submission losses on his record, but at least you can see those 3 individuals do have a little vulnerability on the ground. Now, when you look at Roosevelt Roberts, he has never been submitted. 5 of his 10 victories have come on the mat, including 2 in his UFC career in a Contender Series bout. So a very impressive run. For Roberts, just a very interesting fighter with interesting physical makeup for this division. He's really rounding out his game quite nicely, and it definitely poses some challenges for a veteran like Jim Miller. Now, further adding to the concern of Miller, we talked about his age, and it doesn't seem to be recently adding up. It's been a trend that's been kind of a concern for Miller. He's 0-4 in his last 3-round fights. In fact, all his fights to go outside the first round of his last 4, he's lost all 4 of them. His last time he went the distance in victory was versus a depleted Thiago Alves, making his one and only cut down from 170 pounds down to lightweight, all the way back in 2016. He also beat Joe Lozon before that via a very questionable decision. In his last 12 fights to go outside of the opening round, he is just 3-9, with 2 of those 3 victories coming by split decision. So it needs to be said that Miller has issues. If he can't get that early finish, his ability to win certainly drops off the table. He's still a dog in a fight. He's dangerous. He's still out there swinging, but you can just see it's just not the same way as he, not as effective in the first round, in the later rounds as he is in the opening round. Now, Roberts pushes a pretty solid pace. He started to showcase more of his striking skills, mixing in body kicks and just working on his combination striking, which has been relatively effective. Miller had struggle with the distance and the size of Scott Holtzman. And while Holtzman's a physical specimen, Roberts is definitely the much longer fighter than Holtzman. Miller had a reach advantage over Holtzman. It had to overcome a height advantage. In this case, you'll have to overcome both, and that's certainly concerning. And as I said, Miller tends to wear damage. He tends to slow down, especially in those grueling 3-round bouts, and that is ultimately his reason for a lack of success as the contests continue. Roberts has to be extremely careful not getting caught in a transition early in the fight, because again, if Miller gets your back or is able to lock up a leg or something to that effect, he will submit you, and that's just the fact of the matter here. But look for Roberts to keep it standing early, really work that distance striking, land body kicks, piece up Miller from distance. He might clinch up, look for takedowns, especially as the fight advances and Miller gets tired. And there's quite a good possibility Roberts can lock up a submission here, but I'm anticipating instead he showcases his striking, puts a beating on Miller, and my prediction is Roosevelt Roberts to defeat Jim Miller by decision. Up next, we're in the UFC's welterweight division for a fantastic matchup as the 21-5-0 Lyman, good former Bellator champion, takes on the 16-3 Belal, remember the name Muhammad. Currently, very nice odds on this fight. Lyman good at plus 110, a very slight dog. Muhammad returning at minus 138 as the favorite. And this matchup is a demonstration to the depth of the welterweight division. We have 2 extremely talented fighters that in any other organization would certainly be in that title hunt as far as I'm concerned. And here they're on the outside looking in with a long way to go. You look at Muhammad, 7-3 in the UFC, back-to-back wins, and 6 wins in his last 7 appearances. Very impressive. And he's got just a solid lineup of fighters he's defeated during that tenure. So, Sato, Millender, Tim Means, Jordan Mean, so I stumble over those 2. Just a very, very solid lineup of guys he has bested for good. 3-2 in the UFC. Coming off a solid TKO victory, he beat Ben Saunders by knockout as well. He's got a good, not as deep as a record as Muhammad. His losses to Damian Maia and Alessio Dos Santos, fight that went the distance, it was split decision actually, so very competitive matchup. Chance Rencounter, so both guys actually holding common victories over that. 2 good stop in his last matchup. Physically good, 1 inch taller, 2 inch reach advantage as well. Belal is the younger man by 3 years. Now at this base, we have a striker versus striker bout. Good is the power puncher. Belal is more known for his volume and his work ethic. Good has that crushing right hand, and he did a ton of damage against Rencounter. And if he connects, he can really put you down. He's a solid boxing base, and just generally speaking, he is a dangerous man to exchange with. He will work some kicks into his offense and go to the body and the head, and just generally speaking, he's overall very adept on the feet. Now, if you look at his record, besides the Dos Santos fight, he really hasn't faced another solid striker, mainly guys who are grappling first opponents or lower-level strikers who are just not going to be able to hold up under his pressure. Or a guy like, for example, Ben Saunders, who is a grappler, but at the same time just lacks the durability on the feet to hold up against a fighter like Good. Now, for Belal, he throws some solid volume, and he's more economical with his strikes. He'll dig to the body very effectively. He mixes up his offense very nicely, and he'll work in kicks periodically. And when you look at what Good was, Good was having trouble in small portions against Rencounter, who is primarily a grappler. He came out and absolutely smashed him in the first round and ultimately finished him in round 3. But there were times where Rencounter was like mixing things up, was landing some combinations, and it just seems like Good slowed down a little bit. He was a little stiff. I don't know if he was suffering from an injury. He just didn't look good for small portions against a guy who isn't known for his striking. And again, while he got the job done, if you look at momentary interludes in that fight, you can see there's some openings for a better striker who's going to be able to push the pace on him to have success. Now, the key here, and I think that something that's going to play a big role, is that Muhammad has takedowns in his back pocket. They're an absolutely important aspect of his offense, and he's utilized them effectively in multiple fights. And it should offer a very nice change of pace against Good, both in the fact that it forces Good to think more about just striking. If he can land those takedowns, obviously they're going to score points and tax Good's cardio by being on his back. But even if he throws takedowns at Good and he can't connect, Good's going to have to, it's going to build up some lactic acid in your muscles, having to defend, get those underhooks, and turn out of them. You do it enough, Good will start to slow down overall. And if this is a close fight, that could be the difference maker. As we discussed in the intro, there is that small cage factor, which could make it harder for Good to get away from takedowns and clinch fighting, especially as the fight progresses. On the flip side of things, it also could make it harder for Belal to use that movement to stay out of Good's power punching range. And I think the way you look at this here, the biggest concern if you're backing Belal against Lyman Good is that Good's going to be able to knock him out. We've seen Vicente Luque take out Belal with one punch. Alan Jouban dropped him a couple of times. Belal can eat some big shots. We've also seen that against some opponents who are very dangerous. If Lyman Good can crack him with that right hand, he absolutely could put him down. But instead, look for Belal to avoid that power, mix it up, work in those takedowns, and take over as Good starts to slow down. A very competitive first round most likely will give way to a second round where we see Belal starting to land some takedowns, starting to push the pace a little bit more, and Good landing less and less shots. In the third round, even more so. So my prediction is Belal Muhammad to defeat Lyman Good by decision. In a division that's starting to gain a little bit of momentum with some new prospects coming up, we have a matchup of two fighters who've kind of been there and done that and are in desperate need for a victory. As former title challenger Raquel Pennington, 10-8-0, takes on the 9-5-1 Marion Reneau. Currently, Pennington a slight minus 150 favorite, plus 125 for Reneau. Now, the division's looking interesting with a lot of new members. We just saw Julia Avila put a beating on her opponent, and there's a number of other fighters coming along. Obviously, with Nunes at the top, she's talking about retirement, or at least talking about, what does she got left to prove. So if she decides to walk away, it opens up the door for some of these girls to contend again. I don't know if the winner of this is going to be in that equation, but they certainly stand a better chance than the loser will. Pennington's got her shot, and it's certain she slipped a little bit and sliding back down. Reneau's never been there, and she's also struggling to stay in contention. And one thing, Reneau is considerably older than most girls in the division, which is certainly a concern. She comes into this matchup having lost back-to-back fights to Kunitskaya and Kat Zingano. She had won 3 of 4, including submitting Sarah McMahon, which kind of got her momentum going, but she couldn't continue that in those crucial fights. For Pennington, she lost a rematch against Holly Holm, and it's unfortunate because the first fight she fought Holm, it was a split decision, it was very close. Second one, more definitive in favor of Holly. She did beat Irina Aldana as well, in a pretty solid, I think it was a split decision, and lost to Jermaine Diarandami. And, of course, Nunes was the title fight that she lost after a 4-fight winning streak that got her that opportunity at the goal. Now, looking at Rocky first, she's 1 inch taller. Reneau will have a 1-inch reach advantage. Pennington, 11 years younger than Marion, which is certainly concerning. And Reneau's also been out of action for 15 months, which might give her the opportunity to heal up, but also for the older fighters, it sometimes makes it more difficult to return to action when you've been on the shelf for so long, especially under these conditions. Now, let's have a little bit of perspective here, because I think Raquel Pennington isn't necessarily appreciated for everything she's done. The last 5 girls to beat Raquel Pennington are all UFC champs or former UFC champs. In addition to that, she has 2 victories over UFC champs in Miesha Tate and Jessica Andrade. She has fought the best of the best. Absolutely. One title shot, almost went the distance, got stopped. She was competitive for in moments and spurts, but more competitive than Felicia Spencer at least. No knock on Spencer, just talking about the reality of the situation. So now the number one scenario that jumps out to me in this matchup is Pennington is 6-6 in the scorecards, which isn't a great record, especially when she's not known for her finishing ability. Going the distance and only being 500 is certainly concerning. Included in that 6-6 split is a 2-2 record over 4 split decisions, which tells me she could be 8-4, or she could be 4-8 on the scorecards as well. Now, all that being said, Marion Reneau is a very, very concerning, equally, even more so dismal, 1-5-1 when going the scorecards. Her only victory by decision coming all the way back in 2015 in her UFC debut against a very concerning opponent. Nonetheless, Reneau not doing well on the scorecards. Now, she has shown she can rally and get opponents out of a fight after a slow start. Against Sarah McMahon, she submitted her in round 2 after a rough start. Toledo Bernardo, she finished her in the 3rd round via TKO. Same thing against Dudieva, 3rd round TKO. And she had a late rally against Betch Koheda in a fight that she was going to lose. She nearly stopped Betch in the final frame and earned a draw as a result. Now, Pennington can take a lot of damage. We saw that Nunes finished her midway through the 5th round after having landed 124 strikes and 3 takedowns. It took a lot to get Pennington out of there. I had Nunes to win that fight by decision, and it was the last fight I needed, obviously, to cash in, so that was tough to watch. Marion can crack. There's no doubt about it. She's got some power. Does she hit harder than Amanda Nunes? I don't think so. And she isn't known for volume that could pile up that damage against Pennington over 3 rounds. Pennington's had a lot of success in the clinch and close-range fighting, and Reneau's had issues in that position, especially creating separation against Kunitskaya, who really held her in that spot for prolonged periods of time in the fight. Pennington's at her best when she can incorporate her grappling into a fight, and Reneau has had some issues staying vertical in her matchups. In fact, she's given up a takedown in 8 straight contests. And for Pennington, she has scored a takedown in 6 of her last 8, which doesn't always equate to success for her, but it puts her in a better spot when she can put her opponent on the floor to secure the victory. The striking totals, I think, in this fight will be close. I think Pennington will be the more active consistently over the fight, with Reneau coming in barrages and then kind of holding back. She's had issues where she tends to wait on her opponent and just try and attack in big barrages. And if she can't get the finish or really hurt her opponent, a more consistent offense that might produce the same totals will just look more effective to the judges. I think Pennington, though, is going to land a couple key takedowns in this fight, cement it with some clinch position, and just outwork Reneau. In one of those fights, it'll be close. It'll probably go the way we're hoping to. With Raquel Pennington and Reneau and their track records on the scorecards, there are some concerns of controversial decisions. Nonetheless, I think Pennington edges it out. And as you can tell, I'm taking heed of the fact that we're seeing more finishes in the smaller cage. And once again, I'll be picking by decision. Raquel Pennington defeats Marion Reneau by decision. Moving now to the co-main event of the evening. We are in the UFC's featherweight division for a very fun matchup as the 15-2-0 Josh Emmett takes on the 13-1 Hurricane Shane Burgos. Burgos coming in currently as a slight -138 favorite, plus 110 on Emmett as the underdog. Great fight. Really excited to see this. This one, flew under. It's probably flying under the radar, but it whether it goes 2 minutes or 10 or 15, it's going to be an awesome matchup. And now looking at how this should play out, we have 2 talented fighters. Neither one of them are getting a big push in the featherweight division, but it will be hard to deny the winner an opportunity to fight someone in that upper echelon of the rankings and certainly get their crack at moving into contention. Now, Emmett had scored back-to-back knockouts of Mirsad Bektic and Michael Johnson. He's also knocked out Ricardo Lamas. His only loss in his last 5 appearances was to Jeremy Stephens via knockout in a main event opportunity. For Burgos, 6-1 in the UFC, TKO victory over Amir Khani, split decision win over Cub Swanson. He also submitted Kurt Holobaugh in an interesting matchup, and a TKO loss to Kelvin Cater, who is a fighter on the rise. I think it was just announced he is going to headline Cater's going to be headlining a bout against Dan Ige. That'll be a lot of fun. Now, Burgos 5 inches taller than Emmett. He'll have a 5-inch reach advantage, and he's the younger man by 6 years. So a lot of the physical aspects certainly favoring Hurricane Shane, and that's certainly solid for him, and we'll talk about why that's important. Now, Emmett does have main event experience. I know this is the co-main event, but Josh Emmett fought Jeremy Stephens when all the limelight was on them. Pretty interesting fight. Both have had solid competition all the way through, and comparing who they fought, who they've beat, who they've lost to. Burgos looked really sharp against Cub Swanson. He was throwing good combinations, utilizing his reach very effectively with a solid jab. He'll mix in a beautiful uppercut. He digs to the body periodically. The low kicks are mixed into his offense as well. He's just, generally speaking, a nice diversified fighter. very active with solid volume start to finish. 105 strikes against Amirkhani, 134 against Swanson. Even in the Kattar matchup, when he got stopped in the third round, he landed 89 strikes and actually landed more strikes over the duration of that fight. Going all the way back to Godofredo Pepe's decision victory, the one Burgos picked up over him, 102 significant strikes for Burgos. So it just shows his consistency with his volume. Now, he's an extremely confident fighter. And there are concerns that maybe that makes him a little dismissive or, undervaluing his opponent's offensive skills. As we said, he was stopped by Kattar in a very entertaining back-and-forth bout. He got dropped by Kurt Holobaugh before picking up the submission, so there is instances of him being hurt in fights and not, being, rock solid. He does get hit a lot. Swanson landed 129 significant strikes. Kattar pieced him up. Even Rosa, who we just saw not that long ago, or actually last event, landed 86 strikes and made it a competitive bout before getting finished. Swanson had a heck of a lot of success in the third round of that fight, really pushing forward and putting some pressure on him, and that's where we saw Burgos on his back foot maybe not being as effective. When he fought Kattar, he fought him in the pocket, and he stood, and he didn't have a length advantage as he traditionally does, and he will in this fight, and it kind of showed up. Kattar was throwing good combinations and counters and really piecing up Burgos and matching him and surpassing him in shot for shot. Now, when you look at Josh Emmett, is he capable of that? The guy's got big power in his right hand. He keeps pressure on relatively effectively. I love the way he doesn't pick up a lot of takedowns, especially more recently, but he will use takedown attempts to counter his opponent's ability to manage distance. He'll use those entries to then come up and look for a striking combination or catch him on the break and just close that distance. I like that. It's a very good technique. Now, when you look at his fight against Michael Johnson, he was having issues against Johnson landing with consistency. Johnson's speed and reach were a lot of the issues. Emmett was landing some strikes, but just not enough to win a decision. That's where he was going. He was less than a minute away from losing that fight until he knocked out Michael Johnson. Now, when you look at how Shane Burgos and Michael Johnson compare, Burgos is 1 inch taller than Johnson, and he's got a 2-inch reach advantage. So that Burgos should be able to have something similar as far as the physical advantages that MJ did in that fight. Now, Emmett, I don't want to say he's not very diversified, but I feel like he doesn't throw as many techniques as other fighters do. Again, he was losing that decision against Johnson until he landed that big right hand that put him down. He's not a high frequency thrower. I shouldn't say that. He'll throw, he won't land as often as some other fighters do. He uses the threat of power to maybe slow down his opponent's offense because they know they can't routinely engage. They need to be smart about it. But still, he's not going to blow you out of the barn with his overall offensive output. When he fought Johnson over almost a full 3 rounds, he landed just 22 significant strikes over the duration of that fight, and he hasn't gone a full 3 rounds other than the Johnson fight that went in the final minute since 2017 against lower level competition. So that raises some questions about his ability to win fights where he's unable to score that knockout. When he fought Jeremy Stephens, he dropped him with a counter right hand and put him down, but Stephens was landing more strikes in that fight, landing more in the exchanges, throwing better combinations, and eventually stopped him with a good left hook and ground and pound. That is absolutely concerning for Emmett against a very technical, very solid striker in Burgos. Now, I think what we're looking at here is the tale of Burgos' reach and volume versus Emmett's power and aggression. It'll come down to which one of those two scenarios will carry the day in this fight. Over 3 rounds, look for Burgos to use his jab and combination striking with kicks to outwork Emmett and keep him on the outer ranges of his punches, possibly even stop him. For Emmett, he's going to press forward, he's going to eat some strikes along the way, and he's going to throw power, especially with that big right hand. I don't think he's going to land as much on Burgos, but he is looking to not to outpoint him to land that one fight-changing strike that either hurts Burgos and gives him a round or gives him a round or two, or ultimately knocks him out and finishes the fight. Small cage, absolutely concerned if you're backing Burgos in this fight because it takes away a little bit of his reach and length advantage. It limits his ability to evade Emmett's pressure. But when you look at it, I think his reach, his height, his speed, and again, you have to raise some questions about the durability of Emmett. Yes, he's a big, thick dude, but Stephens put him out with big shots. If Burgos can pile up the damage, you absolutely could see him do something similar. I think Emmett won't throw enough in combination as Kattar did to find the mark with regularity against Burgos, and unless he hits that one-hitter-quitter, which, I never like backing fighters who rely heavily on that, I don't think he gets it done here. And my prediction is Shane Burgos to defeat, oh my gosh, his name is, I just finished saying it, to defeat Josh Emmett by, let's go TKO. I think he gets him out there in the later stages. TKO victory for Burgos. Finally, in the main event of the evening, we have the most heavily lined matchup. We're in the UFC's heavyweight division as the potential winner of this bout looks for a shot at the title. The 13-2-0 Curtis Razor Blaydes takes on the 31-7-0 Alexander Volkov. Great heavyweight fight. Looking at the odds, the line makers have Blaydes as a significant -400 favorite, Volkov returning at +300. The UFC is looking for future title contenders in this division. Stipe is going to take on DC. The winner of that will most likely face Francis Ngannou unless DC retires if he recaptures the belt, which is very likely. And then from there, we're going to look for opportunities to set up new title contenders to kind of give a fresh face to the division. And looking at the fact that neither Volkov or Blaydes have fought Stipe, that certainly is a possible matchup. Yes, Blaydes has fought Ngannou twice. Certainly raises some concerns about the possibility of going at it again, but hey, you never know, especially with Blaydes having so much success recently. Now, Blaydes has won 3 in a row. He's coming off a stoppage victory over Junior Dos Santos. His only 2 UFC losses in 11 fights are against Ngannou, both by TKO. Very impressive, including, I got them both, no, did I get them both right? No, I got the first one wrong. I had Blaydes in the first one, but I had Ngannou in the second one in the rematch. For Volkov, no slouch either. 5-1, holds a victory over former champion Fabricio Verdum. Also beat Roy Nelson, Stefan Struve. Only loss in that stretch came against Derek Lewis in a fight where he pretty much won pillar to post and got knocked out with 11 seconds left. It was crazy. Now, physically, Volkov 3 inches taller, 6'7". The guy's super tall, but they will have the same 80-inch reach, and Blaydes will come into this matchup, should be 10 to 15 pounds heavier than the Russian and 3 years younger. Now, Volkov has highlighted how he expects Blaydes to want to fight this fight, and it's really not too much of a revelation. He says Blaydes is going to want to wrestle. It's his only way to victory as far as he is concerned. And, you see where he's basing that point of view in. Blaydes has taken down his opponents in 8 of his 11 matchups. Didn't take Junior Santos down, but didn't need to before finishing him. Volkov was taken down 3 times by Verdum, a couple early times in his career, but 76% takedown defense, relatively solid. That being said, he's never faced a wrestler like Blaydes who, he's talked about his training. Volkov's talked about training for wrestlers. He's used to fighting wrestlers like this, but again, Blaydes presents a very difficult task in front of him. Blaydes' present combination of size, skill, and just overall athleticism is something that very few fighters can match. And again, as I said, Volkov has probably never faced anybody that brings all of that into this matchup. Volkov's also made another concerning statement in the media. He says, he's quoted as saying, however, despite my limited training, long-distance flight, and jet lag, I'm prepared for our upcoming matchup. That's not super encouraging. He also went on to say that Blaydes is going through similar scenarios, but again, Volkov highlighting that he's got to travel from Russia, wherever he's training from, and having to deal with a lot of these issues, and under the circumstances, it's not exactly awesome. Now, as far as Volkov's offensive abilities, he's got solid technique. He throws decent strikes. We've seen he can put guys out of there. He's not going to be able to throw a lot of kicks in this fight because if Blaydes catches one, he's just going to steamroll him onto the ground. And ultimately, it's, again, not shocking, not a revelation. Volkov has to stay vertical and box Blaydes up. Blaydes showed against Junior Dos Santos he can strike and do damage and got him out of there, especially if he gets you back along the cage and he can let loose. And Volkov isn't super quick, and his height and lower weight for a heavyweight division actually makes it more difficult for him to defend takedowns because he's just very stretched out. He doesn't have the lower center of gravity. In addition to that, Blaydes has the reach that's going to make up for some of those height advantages that Volkov has. Even the reach being the same, he should be able to close the distance and land strikes, and it's going to make him a constant threat of landing takedowns. I think that's going to be a concern, is that he can get in on the inside and throw power, and they're going to work together. If Volkov is concerned about being taken down, he's going to get hit. If he's concerned about getting hit, he's going to get taken down, and Blaydes is going to have a lot of success in those 2 areas. Fabricio Verdum did very well against Volkov until he got tired and worn out. And Volkov needs another scenario like that where Blaydes maybe gets tired after a couple of rounds and Volkov takes it over. I think Blaydes hits way too hard and is way too strong for Volkov to try and wait him out over a couple of rounds, especially from top position. He's not going to be like Verdum trying to look for submissions and control. He's going to look to pound you out of there. Francis Ngannou was able to hurt Blaydes. Mark Hunt hurt him too. Obviously, Ngannou finished him in the second fight. But Volkov's not nearly as big a hitter as those two. I'm not saying you couldn't catch him at heavyweight. Anything's possible. But I think he's more of a death by accumulation type striker where he's going to bust you up for a couple of rounds and eventually put you down. You just can't take it anymore. Look for Blaydes to power through with takedowns, mixing the striking to keep Volkov off balance. Alexander will attempt to use his jab, maybe throw some limited kicks to keep distance, but he's simply not going to be able to. And my prediction is Curtis Blaydes to defeat Alexander Volkov by TKO. So those are my 5 main card predictions for what is currently being called UFC on ESPN 11. Again, we're having so many different fight names. We've got a heck of a lot of fights coming up. Again, on the 27th, we get Poirier versus Hooker, which is going to be a fantastic matchup. Very exciting there. Usman versus Burns and the triple title fight on July 11th. July 15th, the Ige versus Cater matchup is going to be a lot of fun. Figueiredo Benavidez 2, Whitaker Till, all kinds of awesome fights. Holly Holm versus Aldana as well. And of course, Stipe versus Cormier is booked for August, Nurmagomedov and Gaethje in September. So, hey, I will give Dana and the UFC credit. They are delivering with big-name fights. Despite all the other controversy that's swirling around, I'm still enjoying it. If I haven't already mentioned, my preliminary picks will be available at kamikazeoverdrive.net, so please check them out. Follow me on Twitter at KO_predictions. Other than that, folks, that's all I've got for you. So, hey, stay safe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you shortly. Take care, guys. Hi.